Good afternoon. It's afternoon now in Tashkent, and we are very glad to see you here.
Yeah, glad to see you as well. Yeah, let me just yeah. Can you see me? Yeah. Yeah.
So let's then start. So today we are here to listen to some insights on poverty reduction and what lessons should be learned from the case of Bangladesh. And we are very happy to welcome you in the premises of the Republican Graduate School of Business and Management. My name is Dr. Rustam Abduraupov, and I'm the director of the school. And you know that nowadays our country is taking very deep measures on the poverty reduction. In particular, the Ministry of Economy and Industry was transformed into the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction. So that's why I think that your expertise and your thoughts would be very valuable nowadays and very much topical. And that's the reason why we asked you to share some time with us. And once again, we appreciate that you could find some time. And if you do not mind, let me just give a brief introduction to our participants about your background, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the interview. So the Dr. Twaifur Rahman achieved his PhD degree in economics from the University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, in the UK, in 2016. And his research mainly focused on evaluating the impact of microcredit programs in elevating poverty in Bangladesh. And he also got his Master of Science in Financial Management from Middlesex University, London, in 2010, and the Bachelor's degree in Statistics from the University of Chittagong in Bangladesh. And the area of expertise lies, as I mentioned, in poverty, income inequality, policy and impact evaluation, women empowerment, financial inclusion, and various areas of microfinance. As we can see, all these areas are very much topical nowadays, and I think the topicality of them will be rising in the nearest future even more. And Dr. Rahman, could you briefly tell us about your work experience and the brief introduction on what you are currently working on, and what are the projects that you are implementing right
now? Thank you, first of all, and thank you for having me here. I'm really glad, and it's my great pleasure. And basically, my area of expertise in poverty reduction, and in particularly microfinance program. And I implemented, and also, when we say poverty, actually, who are poor? What are the characteristics of poor people? We got to understand this. So by doing research and industry experience, I learned why people are poor and what are their characteristics. And it's if you ask a question to people, why they are poor, people would say, okay, because they are poor, or because their ancestors were poor, because they don't have asset. So these are not actually answered. The answer is because they don't have opportunity, they have very limited opportunity to explore their economic opportunity. They don't have access to finance as they should. So this is what my understanding is. They have very limited opportunity to explore themselves. And if you look at their characteristics, right? What are their characteristics? Other than having low assets and money, this sort of things, I don't really worry about these things. What are their characteristics at a household level? Their head of household you'd see as a very low education or not educated at all. You would see very large household size, and the household, and depending on only one person income, right? So, and also you would see combination of household composition, like men and women in household. You would see most of them could be women, because as you know that Bangladesh or these Southern Asian countries, people are conservative and they don't let their girls or daughter out for work. So that might be another reason. And also you'd see head of household could be women, and obviously chronic illness in the family, that also kills financially. Anyway, these are my findings. So in the past, I worked for ASA, which is one of the largest NGO in the world, and it became cost-effective and sustainable the microfinance institution in the world in 2006 by Forbes magazine. So I worked for them. I did research on their programs, like since 2010, since my master's degree. And I also implemented their education project, which is another, in addition to microfinance, they have education project. Basically, children from poor families, they are not getting, as I mentioned, that their household, their head of household or their parents are not educated. So they don't get help at home to prepare their homework, things like that. And what ASA does, what we have done is we bring students from poor families and put together and giving like after school education, or I would say it's an after school education, group-based after school education, I would say like this. So that also helps to keep them in education, because when students are not like be able to do their homework, things like that, they get discouraged, demotivated, and eventually they drop out. So I implemented that project, and we had 300,000 students across the country and 11,000 education center. And I was research consultant. I followed up over 1 year period of time, and then wrote a management report and then published it into one European journal, which is a very good ranked journal. And being part of ASA, I was implementing one size doesn't fit all. That was my philosophy, because although it is not as big country like Uzbekistan, I mean, if you see the volume, it's a small country, but big country is in terms of number of people, number of population, right? So that's the lesson I try to disseminate. One size doesn't fit all, because although it is a small country, but geographically it varies a lot. Some parts of the country, people stays underwater 6 months, and another parts of the country, they get flooded every year. So based on this idea, I was trying to disseminate and implement law for each region. And also loan cap size. Loans cap, recently what happened is we would see a very small business, but they are giving out like $2,000 loan. It might be, would have been appropriate if you would have like $500 loan, if you would have approved. So things like that was going on, I noticed. Then I was implementing that loan size cap based on the type of business they are doing. Because it was literally, it was like based on the discretion of a branch manager and regional managers. Though they were like to get increased the investment, they're just trying to, okay, without justifying or checking anything, they just approved it. So things was like this was like going on. And also another problem was recently emerged, which is like internal migration. Let's say people migrate, get a loan from their home district, and they moved another region with their families, right? So that also was creating problems. So I was headed on that project to overcome this, and we are implementing an uniform database system. So it doesn't really matter nowadays. Wherever you go, if we put your details, we can track you. If you like, they get loan from one branch in their home district, and then let's say they move to the capital, and they get another loan from the same institution. You know what I mean? So that was the caveat. So we're working on that and improving. And this was my project. And currently I'm working for the New York City Department of Social Services as a senior research coordinator, and my civil service title is principal research scientist. The reason actually I left my physical relationship with ASA, make a distance a little bit, still I'm in touch with them, I'm providing consultancy. So the reason actually my family, my family lives here, and I could not convince my family to move there. So that was the only reason to move in the United States. Otherwise, microfinance is in my DNA. I can't forget this. So anyway, my social service department actually focuses on people to support low-income people in the New York City, to provide them income support, food support, health, and also other support to children and families. Right, so that's all.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, it's I'm very glad to see the person whose DNA has the microfinance issue. Let me go a bit back and ask you about the terminology of poverty. So when was the first terminology introduced? What is poverty, and how the people started measuring it? Because the poverty, as well as the richness, for example, well-being, is comparable terms.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Actually, Amartya Sen, he was the main person behind measuring this poverty. In 1979, when he was presenting his paper in New York Business School, then Foster Greer Thorbecke was their student, was also were participating in his seminar. So the reason, yeah, exactly, you pointed out correctly, because when we see poverty, absolute poverty and relative poverty, now currently world is working on absolute poverty. Relative poverty could be, anybody could be relatively poor if you compare to, now it depends on who you are comparing with. You know what I mean? So now Foster Greer Thorbecke, they were thinking, okay, you say this, okay, if it says transfer assume and monotonicity assume. Transfer assume is like if you transfer income from one person to another person, then what happens is poverty indicator, they must be reflected, or vice versa. So this the assume does. So Foster Greer Thorbecke, they are saying that, okay, you say as long as you satisfy this transfer and monotonicity assume, then any indicator I'll accept. Then they introduced this after 3 years of hard working. They invented that Foster Greer Thorbecke method, which is now widely used in measuring poverty, which is absolute poverty. There are 3 indicators. they introduced 3 indicators, which is number of incidents of poverty, poverty gap, and squared poverty, or what you mentioned, income inequality, or relatively poor, relativity. So they actually measured in 1984, and which I actually applied. These indicators I applied in my PhD thesis to measure how it works. So I found microcredit not only reduces the incidence of poverty, it also reduces the income gap and also income inequality in Bangladesh.
Very nice. And what was the reason for you to be involved, especially in this question? Because you studied, for instance, statistics, or you applied for the economics PhD in economics, but the economics is very wide itself, right? Especially in today's world now, it's even becomes wider. Why exactly your choice was related to this issue?
All right, thank you very much for the question. I would hope I would have been asked that question. In 2005, 2006, when I completed my master's, it's bachelor equivalent to the United States, but I did bachelor and master statistics in Bangladesh. So right after completing one Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, and they are the pioneer. It is one of the pioneering organization in the world in microfinance. I joined as a branch manager in 2006 as a probation officer, and after probation, I was supposed to join as a branch manager. So when I joined with them, as a training, it's like army training. I was moving from one country, staying 1 month in one branch and going out to the field, socializing with poor people. It gives me a sense that, oh my goodness, prior to joining that, I had little idea about microfinance, but not so that, and not even about poor people, how they struggle, how they manage their finance, how they manage their credit. And they're very poor. You can't even imagine how they're managing. They have the talent, but they don't, that's why I mentioned, they don't have the opportunity to explore themselves. So when I was working and writing a story about someone, how they improve their livelihood, then I was thinking, okay, in future, if I do have opportunity to study, I'll study on this area. That's my promise in myself. I never I never said to anyone, because I didn't think that after completing master's, I would be doing another master's and PhD, things like that. Then when I was settled in my job, then I was thinking, okay, I should do some higher study. Then I moved to the United Kingdom. I started my master's, and then when my dissertation time come, then I choose that field. And then eventually I met with the founder of that organization in London, and then he approved my data collection application. And so I wrote thesis, then eventually from my master's thesis, I wrote a publication in Local Economy, which is a 2-star journal, which is solely based on my master's thesis. So since then, just like getting on and on, getting involved. So I never, the most interesting thing is after PhD, when I joined with ASA, I used to travel around the country, going out to poor people to understand their livelihoods. And then when I went to one lady, she was saying, okay, working in microfinance is very hard. They did not reveal my identity. I just went there as a staff, just normal stuff. And then she was saying, oh, microfinance, working in microfinance is very hard, things like that. She was explaining, I was just laughing in my mind. And then my intention was to understand how she was managing all these things. And then I saw she was rearing livestock like cow, crossbreed cow at home too, crossbreed cow at home, and which she was looking after. Her husband didn't need to look after, spend time on this, you know. And then I started getting understanding about how they're managing this. And then she was explaining these things, that she's selling the milk, whatever she is selling, she can manage the weekly installment easily from that. So that was my passion. Like being a senior director of that organization, I was going 3 times in a month at least to the field to understand, because my understanding is if I don't understand what's going on in the field, how do I introduce policy? How do I implement policy? Things like that. So that was in my mind. I used to go out to the field and enjoy the field, you know, working with poor people, and still I do.
Yeah, so it means if there are still poor people, then there are a lot of things to do for us to reduce the poverty. And what measures are being taken in Bangladesh to reduce the poverty level? And what do you think should be the next steps for that?
Right. Thank you. Let me explain you. Currently, Bangladesh has 33 million borrowers, microcredit borrowers, as much as your total population, almost, right? Uzbek population. And they are contributing almost 13% to the GDP, which is a lot. And what actually government did? Government take few steps. First step, when microfinance was emerging in late 90s and early 90s, they formed an organization called Pollikarma Shohayak Foundation, PKSF, let's say PKSF. It's an apex organization, because when it was emerging, the program was emerging, money started to come into the country from IMF, from World Bank, from Asian Development Bank. Now, how they channel this money through to the organization? Then they formed organization PKSF, and they were getting the money from those organizations and channeling this money through to microfinance institutions, or they used to be known as NGOs, non-government organization. I will explain you why they're non-government organization and microfinance institutions. So government take that initiative and pass that money through to microfinance institution and get the money back with very, very low interest rate, like as much as 3%, or 3 to 5% interest rate. And that was the first step. And the second step in 2006, they formed a wing called Microfinance Regulatory Authority, which is within the Bangladesh Bank. Now, we have more than 4,000 NGOs which actually do the microfinance, but they are not eligible to get license from Bangladesh Bank or MRA, Microcredit Regulatory Authority. Why? Because their standard is much more higher. They have strong monitoring policy, and they held accountable to the government. Although they are private, not private, NGOs. What I call is non-profitable organization. They are called it a microfinance institution, but non-profitable in type. What that means is you cannot take out profit being a managing director or founder. You have to reinvest that money into the economy. You cannot take it out. Whatever you take as a salary, that's it. Nobody can take out money from that. So we have very strong regulatory system in place in Bangladesh. There was another reason region actually to thrive those microfinance institution in Bangladesh and help the economy to get running and reduce poverty. And also, what government did, another thing, they allocated piece of land or land in every district. Okay, this is the special zone for grooming small businesses, small manufacturing companies like bread bakeries, like very small companies you can think of, like spoon making or sports materials making. They're very small. They allocated land and give it this land to the startup capital or manufacturers with the very nominal lease agreement for 99 years, let's say. So they provided that space for the people, and they provided credit. You can, if you need credit, you can get credit because banks are running after those big people, and MFI, they created MFI from which they can get easily, they can get the money easily. And also government policies for financial support. Like in addition to microfinance institution, government asked all private banks, okay, you have to invest certain amount of your portfolio to small businesses. So that's the arrangement government did. And now during this pandemic, because of small microfinance institution will be struggling to survive. What they get money from the banks, and they're going to fund those small organizations to let them survive with nominal interest rate, very low interest rate. So that's what government is doing. So, yeah.
And what was the effect of these measures that you mentioned?
Yeah, that effect to reduce the poverty. Now let me just explain you how it does, what it does. Let's say I explain you the other the one lady's experience. So what it does actually, it helps people. So when you have money, you can think of doing something. This is pretty straightforward. If you don't have money, you cannot think, right? If you don't have food in your stomach, you cannot think, right? So that's how it works. So when people get the money, and MFI also makes sure they are investing the money. That's another thing. Like we have in ESA, we have different monitoring tiers. Every monitoring tiers go to the branch and randomly pick up some 2-3 customers. They randomly pick and they visit their project. That's what they have to do. That's what I did being a senior director. I go to the field, I choose a project randomly and go out to the field and visit there. So we make sure that money is invested. So once money is invested, so people will be getting return. So, and it will help them to boost their income and their livelihoods. So now you can think of the aggregate things like that. So now let me give you an example. 4 or 5 years back, what India did, they stopped exporting cows to Bangladesh, right? Now MFIs, they focused on investing especially on this livestock, because during Eid al-Adha, we have very high demand. To meet the demand, we used to import from India because it's our neighboring country. Now, NGO, we focused on giving out loan on livestock. Now we are independent and is much more cheaper than 5 years back when we used to import cattle from India. Now it's much more cheaper. Why? We managed to focus on, okay, we introduce different types of loan products. For example, during Eid time, 6 months before we start preparing for financing on that, encouraging people, going out to the people and asking, do this, do that, and pay me off when you sell it off during the Eid market. So then now you think of the aggregate impact of these things on the economy. Now fish, we are focusing on fish now. We have abundance of fish. We used to like predict that, okay, we might be suffering from fish because fish and rice, that's our staple food. You know what I mean? So now we have abundance of food, abundance of fish, because now people also find their way to fishing or fish to fishing and fish cultivating. I saw a project in northern part of Bangladesh. They have 600 12 feet by 12 feet house, in-house fishing, in-house fish aquarium they built in. And it cost only $500 to build that, and from which they can run their family. You see, MFI is not only just investing money, they also try to find out innovative way to do the business, like fishing, education, and some other things, like agriculture, agricultural development and health. And we have a problem, water and sanitation problem, and NGO is right after it. So we are much more better than compared to India now in terms of education, in terms of sanitation and drinking water facilities. For example, World Bank, they said they don't take foreign money since 2001. We are independent. We do not accept any government subsidy. Government subsidy plus foreign subsidy. They are financially sustainable since 2001. And it took them to get that position in 10 years. They started microfinance in 90s. Anyway, that was not my message. My message is like, then we start giving out, World Bank actually insists us to get some money and to implement water.
Yeah, we do not have signal now.
Sorry for the disruption.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, but I think you have to just turn around the camera, because we can see you like vertically.
Okay, yeah, upside down.
Yeah.
Upside down. Is it okay now?
The view. Oh, here. Yeah, now it's fine. Right.
All right. Yeah. So now we implemented that project, and another time World Bank is asking to get some more money, because sometimes we take money from organization like this to keep the relationship. Otherwise, so now anyway, the message is we did tremendously well in implementing water and sanitation. If you look at India, there are 300 million people. They do not have sanitation, proper toilet at their home. 300 million people. Can you imagine? So we have more than 90% people that can use the proper toilet now. And these are interest-free loans. So microfinance, I would say, is a vehicle. You can input on it. You can input health, education, and I checked. You don't have water and sanitation problem, as far as I understand from the documents. So you can input whatever people needs based on your people needs. So you can input it. It's like a vehicle, you know. So you can look it up with many other programs and reach out to poor people.
Yeah, and what are the main constraints that MFIs were facing before COVID-19? And how do you think the current situation of this pandemic will affect on MFI's activity in the future?
MFI was, before pandemic, MFI was facing overlapping problem, as I mentioned earlier. Let me give you an example. In 2010, a lot of people died in India. Why? Because of the overlapping problem. It's a serious problem. It can kill people. Overlapping can addict people to get the money, because once they are started getting the easy money, they'll just try to get around the money. You know what I mean? Anyway, so that was the experience I had, and microfinance was facing. Anyway, we are working on building up a database, uniform database for all microfinance institutions. So we are working on that. And we have a database called National Identity Database. So we're trying to collaborate with the government and link up with the database. So we're working on that. And now during the pandemic, government asked microfinance institutions, or MFI, to stop collecting their installment. So as I mentioned, that definitely it will have an impact on the microfinance institutions. And at the same time, what government did for the employee, for the sake of employee, they also circulated a memo that you have to give people salary as you should. You have to continue doing this. In addition, we are going to provide funding, you guys. So now government issued a memo right after Eid. They have to start, microfinance institutions should start their activities. At least not getting installment, you should give out money, because right after Eid al-Fitr, they will need money for preparing for the business again, 2.5 months after Eid coming, 2.5 months after. And also people will be doing their cultivation, agricultural cultivation, like paddy and things like that. People need working capital. So where would they get the money from? And then people will be will be already in trouble. They will be in more trouble if we stop there. So government circulated that, okay, you should start your activities now, because they realized that, okay, if MFI stopped giving out loans, then poor people will be in further disaster. So during pandemic, it will be affected definitely, and we should find an innovative way to deal with it. For example, microfinance is doing a group-based loan activities. How does it work actually? They form a group in a village and then target their potential customers, clients or borrowers, and then form a loan center in one of the borrower's house. People, let's say in a group, there are like 15 to 35 people in a group. So they have if it is weekly installment, then a certain time or certain day in a week, people come to that loan center, to their house, and give their money, installment, or receive their loans, or give their savings, or receive their savings, things like that. And these are loan activities. So what they do is like we're maintaining social distancing, right? So we are like changing with our operational strategy from group meeting. We cannot have any more, we used to call it group meeting. That means all people come, all 15 to 35, let's say 20 forwards, they come and sit in a place and do their activities. We cannot do that anymore. So we changed it. And also my thinking is if we could introduce mobile payment, that would also help during this pandemic. Mobile payment system and mobile disbursement system. So we have to find innovative way to deal with this. So, yeah.
Yeah, in particular, Uzbekistan this year, the year 2020 is named also in Uzbekistan as the year of enlightenment, the research and science and development of the digital economy. So the payment systems are the part of the fintech technologies, and we are paying great attention to the development.
Okay, great to know this. Thank you.
And it's obvious that the experts are predicting the lowering the levels of the economic development overall in the world because of the current situation. So what is the country as Bangladesh, what measures should the country take besides those that you mentioned in order to reduce the negative impact of this pandemic?
In addition, basically, we don't have government social safety net programs, which is like, other than those who are freedom fighters, we did not have that in that scale. We don't have social safety net programs. So I do think that social safety net programs, things like in New York, in the USA that we have, that would also help poor people to survive in some extent. And also, there is a popular program, we call it Food Stamp. Now it's renamed as a SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. What that helps is we give out a monetary help to poor people, those who are low income people. It loaded with money, so you cannot spend money other than the food items. So it's given to their hand as a card, debit card, like a debit card, and they cannot spend money other than the food items. So it's a solution for, like, we don't need to think about like, okay, I'm giving you money, you're spending on other things, you gambling, this and that. No. So these sort of social safety net measures, to some extent, we cannot, like, developing countries or low income countries, they cannot start like covering like that we do in the United States. So we can do it like little by little, targeting who poor. There are like another terms called ultra poor. So we can segregate the target population, things like that, and giving out and starting giving something to let them survive. So, anyway, and in addition, if we have those microfinance institutions right across the country, it will help the government to implement this side of mass project as well. Right, so.
Yeah, thank you. And as I mentioned above, one of your research interests are related to the women empowerment and income inequality. So, have you found any correlation in your research between women empowerment, poverty reduction, and income inequality?
Thank you. Yeah. I wrote a paper which is Women Economic Activities, which is published in the Journal of Sociology and Social Policy. In that, I found that okay, people who are involved in economic activities, let's say in microfinance activities, they are more likely to be empowered. They have access to resources within the household. They have a voice to, they can raise their voice within the family to implement any family decision like wedding, education. You know, poor people, poor and low-income country like Bangladesh, father always tend to their son, not tend to send their son to school rather than okay, allowing you to work with me rather than allowing you to study. You work with me and make some money for the family, things like that. So when this situation arises, women can raise their voice. And married, again, father, they want to, they want their daughters to get married as early as possible. So in this case, mother can raise their voice. No, I want her to continue to study. Things like that. They can decide. They can decide in like purchasing household assets and important assets, okay, which you need to buy. So when they get the money, they can implement it. And I also was developing a scorecard method to capture this, because when you say women empowerment is like different dimensions on it, a lot of dimensions. So I was implementing a scorecard model to capture this women empowerment. So I found a very good, I found a very good positive impact that microcredit has in women empowerment and poverty reduction. And let me give you an example. We have more than 51% people are women, as much as in Uzbekistan, you have almost 50-50. So you decide a policy which exclude 50% of your population. So would you be able to implement your production reduction policy if you leave them behind? So my understanding is, yeah, we should include them. We should be inclusive in terms of policy making. And also, you can think the aggregate impact, the overall impact, when they have empowered, they have more education, so they will be out of poverty in the future. So we have to start from a point. We have to start from a point. So when we start from a point, then that will impact on household level education, which will have impact on income in the future, and then ultimately poverty reduction. It's like different steps, and that has to become one after another.
Yeah, that's exactly what our president had proposed, and now we have 5 initiatives of development. One of the initiatives is exactly related to the topic that we are now discussing. And I think after this interview, there will be a lot of more people who would be interested in your research on this topic among our participants. So I'm glad that you mentioned all these elements now. And what do you think will be the main research areas in the next few years, considering the current situation in the world related to the topics that you are interested in?
In the current, in the future, we should, the whole world is like turned around, getting upside down. So we have to start thinking, okay, during this pandemic, how poor people are managing themselves to learn, to get understanding how people are doing their businesses, having that constraint, having that barrier. So we got to understand this, and based on this, we may need to think of twisting and tweaking the models and try to find the way, try to find the way to help them out. So that would be the most challenging part in the coming years, to understand how they're managing themselves, how they're managing their family finances, and what their constraints, and what we got to look at, things like that. So yeah, it's a very terrible situation we are in now, but hopefully we'll get through this. Hopefully we'll get through this.
Yes,
So,
and you see the overall, even the values of a lot of people are being changed, and some of the professions, some of the areas that that the businessmen will looking more precisely or paying attention now. Now they're paying less attention to that because they understand that there might be this kind of risk of pandemic, or even though a lot of people were not, they wasn't considering this in their business plan and other plans. So now with the current situation, I think the topics that you are interested in are becoming even more actual, even more topical.
yeah.
And if you allow, let's see if there are any questions about our participants. So
Okay.
dear participants, and if you want to ask a question, you can send your question in the Q&A section, and we will read it through. Or if there are anyone, because we have also sent the invitation to the Ministry of the Economic Development and Poverty Reduction. If there are any representatives of the ministry, you are also welcome to raise your hand, and we will let you in. So here is one of the questions, and the question is, what is the role of the digital economy to reduce the poverty?
Oh, thank you. It has huge impact on the economy. For example, if I give you my country's situation, let's say when a poor people goes to the market with their products, when they sell, obviously in cash in hand, right? All cash economy, right? And then when they were returning to home, they might be robbed. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is the most critical part of being given the constraint of my country. This is the most important thing. So people always get mugged on the road after selling their products when they have cash money. So this is the one risk. And let me give you from the microfinance institutions' point of view, we have incident at least once in a month that our loan officer get robbed on the road because they're collecting cash money from the loan center, from the village, and bring it to their office, right? On their way to the office, on their way back, they get robbed. So this sort of financial risk still we have, because we're not digital, we're not maintaining the digital transaction or digital payment. Now, what Bangladesh did, Bangladesh introduced a mobile application, money transfer, and then it has huge impact. Now about 20 million people have those online account, which they didn't think if you don't have that facility. Now we have that facility in Bangladesh. Now it's getting popular. And also we started experimenting digital installment collection digitally. So it has impact. Digital economy has impact. For example, not even digital financial transaction. Now during this pandemic, digital wedding, digital meeting, and digital education, it also become more important. So in addition to finance,
Well, thank you so much for the response. And we've got another comment here from the Mr. Juraev. He's the specialist from the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction, and he asks, what was the microfinance coverage rate in Bangladesh, and how you motivated the people to use this kind of financing?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. Microfinance coverage, we have 33 million borrowers, microcredit borrowers in country, and ASHA has almost 7 million borrowers. And ASHA disburses every year about $4 billion. And their current portfolio is $2 billion. And the coverage, ASA, they have covered all 64 districts in Bangladesh. And I must mention this, the coverage, in terms of coverage. We have some districts, people stay underwater 6 months, inundated by water. They cannot see other than these things, just water. They wake up, they go out, they need small boat, dinghy boat, to move around, to roam around. Can you imagine, in these places, we have our operation. And I was the one who was trying to invented some products for them based on their needs and based on their activities. So I was roaming around those districts, 5 districts, to find a solution for them.
And how do you motivate?
Oh, how do you motivate? What is basically, rich people go to the bank and poor people don't. Bank goes to poor people. That means microfinance institution, they go to the poor people. As I mentioned that loan activities, loan center, they form a loan center. They target people who actually meet the criteria, microfinance criteria. They go out to the door and they try to understand what their activities and what they need. And then they discuss with the head of household, particularly man, and then they motivate. And another motivation is easy access, easy approval, no collateral. That's another motivation. No collateral, no hard information. You don't need to submit 10 pages of business proposal. Our loan officers, they go out to the field, and they are, managers, loan officers, they are always in the field. They are always in the field. They come to the office in the afternoon. After 1 o'clock, they come back to the office and do their office work. But before that, they're always in the field. They watch out for the new borrowers, and And they watch out, they go out to visit the loan applicant's application, justify the information and things like that. They are always in the field. They are trying to motivate. They are reaching out to the people. So on the most thing is they don't need to come to our office. We go to door to door. We go to door to door. We reach out to them. They don't reach out to us. We reach out to them. So
we have one question. The Mr. Shahabuddin Davlatov would like to ask the question. I'm letting you to talk, Mr. Davlatov. Yes, you're online.
Okay. Hi again. My name is Latif. I would express my deep gratitude for both of you, Mr. Rustam Abdurauf and to Mr. Rahman, for organizing such informative video conference. I'm a representative of the Ministry of Economic Development and Reducing Poverty. Name of our ministry speaks for itself. One of our the biggest our responsibility is fighting poverty. As a proverb sounds, it's better to prevent disease than treat it later. According to your research, what measures must be taken for helping people who are at the edge of poverty, for not to let them become poor? Thank you in advance.
No, thank you. Thanks for your question. Well, as I mentioned, that we should, first of all, what we need to do, we need to set a criteria who are eligible for microcredit. Obviously, microcredit is one of the tools for poverty reduction. So first of all, we need to understand and set a guideline or criteria for eligibility. And then we have to let them access to the finance. We have to let them to explore their economic opportunity. In Bangladesh, prior establishing microfinance institutions, people used to go to the loan shark. We used to call it loan shark. They used to charge interest rate 150%. Whereas microfinance charges only 15%. And loan sharks, they charge 150%. Can you imagine? So we have to break this barrier. We have to remove that constraint, financial constraint of the poor people, to let them out of the poverty.
So we have so it is needed to increase the access to the funding.
Yeah.
I see. And thank you.
And also, yeah, in addition, let me just explain. And also, we should, what microfinance also does, we help exposure visit. We help train our borrowers. And although microfinance institutions, they rarely have training institute to give them IGA training, we call it IGA, income generating activities training. But we do collaborate with the government institutions. Like I mentioned livestock. We get someone expert from the government and give the training for rearing ducks, chickens. We hire expertise from the government and give them training. So this kind of we do because, and another thing is exposure visit. Let's say in some part of the country, they are very good in rearing cattle. They are making money from rearing cattle, but other parts of the country, they are like get afraid of. Then what do? We found potential borrowers and then take them to that region and let them see how they are doing. So this kind of exposure visit also build confidence in poor people to get started a new business.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Here is another question from Mr. Hashimov, who asked, what are the main factors behind the success of Grameen Bank model and the role of Islamic finance in poverty reduction in Bangladesh?
Sorry, so did you mean the difference between Grameen Bank model and Islamic microfinance?
These are two different questions. Like the main factors behind the success of Grameen Bank model. This is the first question. And the second question that he asks is, what is the role of Islamic finance in poverty reduction in Bangladesh?
Oh, thank you. I'm answering the second question first. The role of Islamic microfinance. We do have Islamic financing in getting bigger loans from banks, but we don't have yet Islamic microfinance in Bangladesh, right? And what are the main factors? Now, coming to the first question, what are the main factors behind this? And first of all, as I mentioned, that is a group-based lending when Grameen started. And it started from the neighboring village in the University of Chittagong, where I studied. Because, the founder of Grameen Bank, Professor Yunus, he was professor in the University of Chittagong. So at the time he started his project in neighboring village of our university. Anyway, that's the history. Now, the main factors are, it's a group-based lending. And at the time I mentioned to go to Loan Shark, then they used to get charged 150%, whereas Grameen Bank used to charge 15%. And it's approval process. They used to get approved just in matter of days. And also the group methodology, peer screening. Okay, when a new borrower comes to the loan center, they always get recommendation from existing borrowers. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah. So they always get a recommendation from existing borrowers. So what existing borrowers does, according to the Grameen model, if borrower is failure to repay, default, that means whole group is default. That was the main stringent law. And also, if you delay in group meeting consecutively 3 weeks or 4 weeks in a month, then you will not get your next loan. That was the stringent law, I'd say. And that is the main difference between Grameen and ASA. Because ASA believes, we believe that I also worked for Grameen, so I know this basic difference. And so our ASA belief is that, okay, we cannot penalty, let's say we are in a group, we cannot penalize someone else for someone else's default. So we don't penalize that. We just independent liability. And Grameen call it group liability. And later on, ASA found that, okay, this individual liability works better than the group liability when it comes to the beyond Bangladesh, like in other countries, it works better. So that was another thing, and they are established in the rural village areas, Grameen Bank. When government in 1983, government take up Grameen model as a government bank, then it was in their constitution that they cannot establish in the urban areas. Their branches have to be located in the rural areas. And being a branch manager, your responsibility is to go door to door of the poor people and not those poor people. So that was the main success. And at that time, yeah, people like used to get charged 115%, 150%. Now they're only 15%. So these things worked better, you know. So, and also the philosophy was like, if we help, donation doesn't help people to come out of poverty. It cripples them economically. You know what I mean? If you keep giving donation, people will not be working. So that's the hard truth, you know?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of questions, but if you allow me, I will ask the
yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, and then we will finalize our interview. So the last two questions are asked by Mr. Juraev, and he asked, what was the impact of remittances in poverty reduction in Bangladesh?
Excellent question.
And the second question is, how did you guarantee the repayment of the allocated money?
Repayment of the allocated, okay, good. First of all, let me explain remittance. ASA has more than 3,000 branches right across the country, and most of them are in villages. 75% branches are located in village. And we have expatriate people, a lot of people that live in abroad, and we have collaboration with Western Money Union, and people send their money, and they can get right to their door. Now we deliver money, as I mentioned, it's a vehicle. Microfinance institution is just a vehicle. So we are passing through this money. Last year, people remit through our channel only $1 billion US. Almost we disbursed $1 billion US. Can you think of that impact? So there was sorry, I forgot the second question.
The second question is about the guarantees on
guarantee of repayment. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So guarantee of repayment is, we have to make sure that, as I mentioned earlier, we have to make sure that money is invested. Money was invested in a project, whatever they said. Buying a cow, or setting up a duck farm, or setting up a poultry farm, whatever they said. Buying a small transport to passing people, like getting whatever they said. We have to make sure that money is invested. Now, how do they make sure the money is invested? Because loan officers are going to your door once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you are meeting with them every week. So in a sense, not money and get what you are doing. So as long as money is invested, we hope that money will be coming in. And if you look at our repayment rate, is almost more than 98%. And in Pakistan, we have operation in Pakistan as well. We have almost 100% repayment rate, almost 100%. We have 400,000 borrowers in Pakistan. And our average loan size in Pakistan is about $250 US. So as long as we can make sure that money is invested, people are invested their money, so that investment guarantees you that money will come back. And also, we can twist and tweaking the models based on their needs. Are they able to give us back weekly or monthly or just one-off? So we can twist that. We can introduce those kind of flexibility in terms of repayment. So it used to be, in Bangladesh, used to be like very rigid model. Weekly, you have to give back weekly, right? Now we introduced them. We introduced weekly, because some business, they can't get money weekly. For example, if you have cultivating fishing, you have fishing, then you cannot do. You need one-off payment. If like during Eid al-Adha, before Eid al-Adha, if you invest money on cattle, then you have to give like one-off payment, one-off repayment. Like 3 months later, you pay me off with that additional money. So for getting this kind of guarantee, we need to like be innovative, and we have to give some sort of flexibility in addition to our other things.
Yes, indeed. Or if there is a type of business that has the seasonal manner.
Exactly.
So right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here is, I think the last audio question, because the other colleagues from the ministry would like also to join our conversation. So if just let it be the last one, because please, you are online.
Yes, hi, Dr. Rahman and Mr. Rustam. First of all, thank you for organizing this interview. So my question is that before the interview started, I read a paper on Bangladesh's poverty reduction practice and came across a phrase. There was a sentence that it said, so Bangladesh reduced poverty in rural areas by 90%, whereas in the urban areas, it wasn't so much successful. So the question I wanted to ask is that, did you use two different methods or approaches in reducing poverty in rural and urban areas in different questions, or how did it go? Or was it the same approach applied in for the whole country, but then the rural areas and the urban areas different? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, we apply same rule across rural and urban areas. And the reason might be getting urbanized people more poor. It could be we have internal migration rate, which is staggering in recent years. This might be another reason that poor people, because they are seasonally employed or underemployed, to get full-time employment, to guarantee of making money 30 days round the clock, they sometimes move to the urban areas. And in the urban areas, there are plenty of opportunity as well. So it could be an impact that moving, but we are implementing the same strategies for rural and urban areas. But as I mentioned earlier, that based on the region, we have some other policies, other government policies based on the region, like coastal belts. To protect those people, we have some sort of government, some sort of initiative over there. And to protect our areas, we have some sort of initiative there. Government is placing, like improving communication system is important for economic development. As I mentioned, those 5 districts that need to stay underwater 6 months, most of the year, most of the time in a year. So what they do nothing other than sitting down at home and do some fishing when water comes. So government is improving their communication road and infrastructure development in rural development. And also in early 90s, we took initiative to improve road and infrastructure development in rural areas that have a tremendous impact.
Okay, Dr. Rahman, I would like to express one more my sincere gratitude.
It's my pleasure, sir.
For sharing your very valuable insights and experience. And I think this is our first meeting, but not the last meeting. And I very much hope as soon as all these pandemic issues will be dealt with, we can meet in person. And and I would like to invite you to our graduate school because I think there are a lot of common research interests and other initiatives that we can have together. And thank you so much once again.
You're welcome, and it's my pleasure to meet you, Oli. And thank you for all questions. Thank you all. Who didn't I see you, but you participated in my meeting. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And for the participants, if you have any questions to Dr. Rahman, you can also send us, and we will communicate these questions. And you're very welcome to participate in our next interviews and webinars. And thank you to all for joining us today. And have a nice day. Thank you so much.
You too, sir. Nice to meet you, sir. Bye-bye.